This is the rendezvous. You weren't followed, were you? Wait, who's there? In De Republica, Cicero makes the fascinating observation that the religious system in a society usually parallels its political system. For instance, the Romans had a republic in which senators shared power in an assembly, so their religious system had a pantheon of gods like Zeus, Mercury, Hera, and so forth. They acted like celestial senators on Mount Olympus. By contrast, ancient Israel had monotheism, and their political system reflected this, with unitary monarchs like Saul or David or Solomon. According to social scientists and historians, Judaism still has a tendency to favor strongmen, like Karl Marx or Sigmund Freud. People who, once their preeminence is established, can never be questioned or challenged. Jewish culture never evolved the republican form of government. It was always totalitarian in nature. Disobey Moses, and you get beheaded. The leaders favored by Jewish culture were always Mosaic in temperament, hence the love of Lenin or Stalin or Marx. Cicero suggests that the religious system is used to prep people to accept the political system. Why I mention this is that in reading Montesquieu, he has a chapter entitled that the Catholic religion is most agreeable to monarchy, and the Protestant to a republic. Quote, when the Christian religion 2 centuries ago became unhappily divided into Catholic and Protestant, the people of the North embraced the Protestant, and those of the South adhered still to the Catholic. The reason is plain. The people of the North have and will forever have a spirit of liberty and independence, which the people of the South have not. And therefore a religion which has no visible head is more agreeable to the independency of the climate than that which has one. According to Montesquieu, who was Catholic by the way, Catholics favor hierarchy, order. They have a coherent guiding intelligence channeled by the Pope. Protestantism, by contrast, is an organization without a pope, hence it's incoherent and fracturing into smaller sects. But on the good side of the balance sheet, it favors freedom and independence. Most of the systems coming out of Protestant countries, if you notice, are all about self-organizing systems that run themselves without a designated leader. A republic, for instance, is a system that runs without a dictator or a strongman. Laissez-faire economics, as deduced by Adam Smith, was all about an economic system that can run without central planning and financial overseers. The Protestant country of England came up with the concept of natural selection, in which God doesn't necessarily intervene in the morphological changes of animals. The environment does it in a self-regulating system. All of these models are favored by Protestant countries. The downside of Protestant freedom is that its love of pluralism conduces to incoherence. John Stuart Mill, in Considerations on Representative Government, writes about the patchwork of different provincial laws and political setups in England and admits that it's all incoherent. He adds, they exist in England but vary incompletely, and with great irregularity and want of system. In some other countries, much less popularly governed, their constitution is far more rational. In England, there has always been more liberty, but worse organization, while in other countries there is better organization, but less liberty. Why I mention all these things is that the United States began as a Protestant experiment. It was a messy patchwork of different states and municipalities, the model balancing freedom against coherence, and usually siding with freedom. In that original Protestant setup, the Senate would have been seen as more central to the government than the president. Just as Protestants minimized the Pope, so they had deep distrust in central authority vested in a political leader, so the powers of the presidency were strictly curtailed. This, of course, changed once the demographics changed. As the Protestant population declined and more Catholics and Jews emigrated to America, the political and cultural assumptions altered. To the Catholic or Jew, hierarchy and order are more prized than notions of Protestant incoherence marketed as liberty. To these new groups, used to the Pope or Moses, the assumption naturally was that power should emanate from the president rather than the Senate. If you think about it, this cultural and ideological difference is what shaped the fracture that culminated in the Civil War. The southern states, still solidly Protestant demographically, prized the old Articles of Confederation setup. In fact, that's why they called themselves the Confederacy. In the early America, guided by the Articles of Confederation, everyone referred to the United States as the Confederacy. Jefferson did, Madison did, Monroe did, and so forth. So when the southern states referred to themselves as the Confederacy, it was a direct reference to the old compact of the collection of independent states. They rejected the new model of centralized control and federalism that grew as Northeast demographics swelled with new non-Protestant European groups. We've done presentations before about how in the lead up to the Civil War, the North had a population boom due to immigration. The North doubled in size between 1840 and 1860, all on the power of immigration, as historian Gary Gallagher mentions.
The North was increasing far more rapidly in population during the antebellum decades than was the South. There was more immigration by far. The South was losing ground in population and thus clout in Congress. The South was aware of the fact, obviously, that the North was outstripping it in population. The House of Representatives, clearly dominated by the North well before the Civil War, because, as you know, that's representation based on population there. The Senate was something the South tried to maintain parity, and we'll talk about more about that in just a minute.
As the population changed, as new non-Protestant cultures asserted themselves, the political assumptions changed. Just as the 1500s saw schism where Protestant fought Catholic, so the Civil War paralleled it in the 1860s, whereby people who favored leaderless self-organizing systems fought against individuals who favored a more monarchical structure of centralized federal power. I won't get into the pros and cons of the Protestant model versus the Catholic model as Montesquieu framed it. At any rate, it was just interesting considering how religious systems affect political systems, how cultural assumptions shape assumptions regarding how government is to be run in a given society or historical period. As you know, The New American has partnered with a platform called Locals recently. It's a for-pay platform where fans can help support the show for like $5. Think of it like seeing a street musician and throwing a few coins in his cup. Besides, if you sign up, I can stop selling my bootleg merch, like the Daniel Natal urinal cake. That was an even worse seller than the Daniel Natal in action figure. Turns out that kids didn't exactly care to see Daniel engaging in an action as he surfs the web, or engaging in an action as he watches TV. These were not big sellers. Embarrassingly, focus groups determined that the in-action figure in particular did slightly better when rebranded as the Daniel Natal voodoo doll. At any rate, drop by our web address at thenewamerican.locals.com if you want to have more intimate contact with the hosts, get additional content not available elsewhere, and if you want to help support the show.